Hi, everyone. I have a secret to tell you. I am Satoshi Nakamoto. I'm not really, but I was very much tickled by the fact that one of our members called Satoshi a she, and she very may well be. Now, my name is actually Wendy Hanamura, and I come to you from San Francisco, where I work here, the Internet Archive. How many of you have ever been to the Internet Archive? Or oh, good. How many of you use the Internet Archive's tools like the Wayback Machine, or our 3 million hours of television, or our 3 million books? That's great. Because if you have ever visited us online or in person, you know that our mission, what we feel in our DNA, is universal access to all knowledge. That's what gets us up in the morning. Isn't that really what the great promise of the internet was and is? That anyone connected to it could have at their fingertips information. So you can imagine how we all felt 2 years ago when we woke up and realized that the web that we count on had betrayed us. We turned to our screens for information, and instead we got lies. And it wasn't even that we were so disappointed with the election outcome. We were disappointed that that thing that we trusted had somehow betrayed us. And worse yet, that those lies were shared by us to our friends and communities. But this is not a time for despair or cynicism. No, this is what Wired magazine had to say about us. They said the Wayback Machine is a monument to the idealism of that Bolshevik dawn when information longed for freedom, and when that freedom in turn was believed to be the royal road to human liberation, sob. Well, this is not a time to cry. This is a time for all of you to roll up your sleeves and get working. Wired went on to say, the Wayback Machine keeps betting yes, that against all odds the web can be programmed to prevent its own collapse. You folks are the people, I assume, who are building the next web, building Web3. And so I'm asking each of you to close your eyes and think about this with me. What is the web we want? What is the web we deserve? I came a long way, actually, from San Francisco to meet you because I really wanted to get to understand the people who were building this over in this part of the world. So how many of you are from Berlin? So many of you, how many people have come from beyond this city wall? How many of you are coders? How many of you are investors? How many of you are here because you think that you can make a lot of money in crypto? Oh, one person's honest, thank you. Well, I have to believe that you're here for more than that, more than the promise of making a lot of money. I have to believe that you're here because, like me, you believe that there could be something better. Here's what I believe. I believe that the web we want is got to be safe. And I'm using these very simple terms because unless we can communicate with the whole world why we're working on this, we're not going to win. We're not going to succeed. If we talk about metadata schemas, and you know what? Half the world isn't going to be there with us. But they understand that the web they have now is not safe. And the web we deserve would be safe. If we could somehow extract central control, it would be so much harder to hack. It would be so much harder for one government to take you down. The web we want should be reliable. It shouldn't be that when a company goes out of business, that whole website goes with it. How many of you had GeoCities sites back in the day? Oh, good. And when they disappeared, what did you do? Well, we hope you went to the Wayback Machine, because we really worked hard to get all of those GeoCities into the Wayback Machine. But it shouldn't be that all of your human output disappears. The web we want, thus, should remember. And perhaps even more importantly, the web we want must also forget. And for all of you who are going to be building this last part is going to be pretty hard. Because when all of the data is distributed across many machines, and there isn't a central point of control, and somebody wants to assert their privacy and take something down, how's that going to work? You've got to remember and you've got to forget. The web we want should be a marketplace, but it also must be a public square. A public square that is not dominated by trolls, a public square that is not dominated by the people with the most money. The web we want needs to be built by many. This first web that you guys call the Web 2.0, well, we had all of the builders over to the Internet Archive. Just Friday, Richard Stallman was in the house, and Tim Berners-Lee and Vint Cerf. But this time, I want to ask you all, can there, in addition to being a lot of fathers of the internet and fathers of the web, I'd really love it if there were a few mothers and a few people who were non-binary. The web we want needs to include many voices. We fail if everyone who's on the web, building the web, understands the web, is from North America and Europe. The web we want still needs to be magical. It needs to be something that gets you up in the morning, that gets you to create and share. And yes, the web we want needs to be fun and surprising. We want a web that has many winners. And that means that not just a few corporations should profit from all of the work that so many do. And yes, once and for all, can we try and lock this web open for good? That's the web that I want. So how are we doing? I wanted to spend just a little bit of time to tell you about the last 3 years of my life and how I have been marching with this community, mostly in America and San Francisco, to build what we call the decentralized web. For me, it all began 3 years ago in 2015 when this guy, my boss, Brewster Kahle, was asked by the 5 largest US foundations to imagine a moonshot for the internet. Do you know that term, a moonshot? It's like a big, audacious goal that could change the nature of things. What would a moonshot for the internet be? So here he is standing on the stage of the Ford Foundation and talking about what he was then calling the distributed web. And he said, you know, with all due respect to Sir Tim, the World Wide Web is not secure, it's not reliable, and I think we could do better. He challenged all of us to try to do better. And that was actually a pretty audacious thing to say because actually, right in the first row was Tim Berners-Lee, sitting there looking at him at that event. Building on Brewster's vision, we held the first Decentralized Web Summit in San Francisco at the Internet Archive, and we invited what we then believed to be the 80 top builders working in little pockets all over the world on these decentralized protocols. And I guess Tim wasn't that mad at us because he came, and here he is talking actually with Zuko Wilcox, who just a few months later went on to found Zcash. But he had already built some of the most performant decentralized protocols of their day, Tahoe Laughs, for instance, that had not gotten picked up. So he knew he needed to build in an incentivization, thus Zcash. It was early days, and it was really fun to have all of these really excited people together for the first time. You had some of the builders from IPFS and Solid and Rebuilding the Web of Trust. You had folks like Gavin from EthCore, and Vlad was there, so many others. You have to imagine that back in 2016, these were just notions, just thoughts, really, of what it could be like. And so we were so excited when on the stage, the first JavaScript was shown. The first JavaScript implementations of the DAT protocol and IPFS right there on our stage. They were the first bits of code to even start to work. They were rickety and couldn't be stress tested for sure. But there we were in 2016. Now fast forward to August of 2018, when just a few months ago, we had the second Decentralized Web Summit. We called it Global Visions Working Code because we really wanted to show how far everyone had come. And this time, 1,000 builders came. But not just the builders. It was also the legal scholars and the policy wonks, the artists, the activists. We called them all because we realized that if we're going to build this thing, it's going to take more than just engineers. Some of the things that you would have seen if you were there, actually, was anyone there at the decentralized? Oh, very good. I see some friends in the house. If you were there, you would have seen IPFS running across a mesh network of Raspberry Pis built by Toronto Mesh. And even better, you would have seen these great workshops where people who didn't know anything about the decentralized web could build a mesh network and run these file sharing protocols on top of it. You could have presented your ideas to Vint Cerf and Tim Berners-Lee, debated them. Sir Tim brought his own ideas. He's been working on something called Solid for quite a while, and now he started his own company, Inrupt.com. The idea behind which, I understand, is that you can take your own data with you from platform to platform. I think one of the most exciting things that happened at the Decentralized Web Summit of 2018 was because of this developer, Irakli of Mozilla. He premiered in that week 2 new APIs for decentralized protocol builders that should make it much, much easier for you folks to build decentralized apps and other things as web extensions in Firefox. Kudos to Christina Bowen and the Digital Life Collection. She and her team sat in this room, we called it the Seance Room, for 2 full days, and people came to her to try and map what does this ecosystem of decentralized technology look like. And thanks to that, today you could go to this URL. Anyone can put themselves on the map by filling out a very simple survey. And it's, I think, a transformative tool because you can see the relationships between technologies and projects. You can see who's doing what and who you might want to work with. You can see the most mature development, all in this one map. We also put together something called the Way Forward Room. Why the Way Forward? Because we wanted people to get out of their boxes and have a little fun and play, to make things with their hands, and also to remember our elders and also our children. Because if you're going to be building Web 3.0, you're not building it just for yourselves. You're building it for your grandparents and your parents and your children to be. So you need to have them firmly in mind, working with them, thinking about them, keeping them in your heart and mind as you build this next web. And what about us? At Internet Archive, Brewster Kahle showed the first pilot of the decentralized Internet Archive running on WebTorrent and IPFS, YJS, and Gun. So right now, in this very pilot version of our own site, you can call up videos, you can call up books and different things that are distributed across many different file sharing systems. But I want you to remember the lessons of Web 2.0. Technology alone cannot save us. So when we put together the Decentralized Web Summit, We did so with the great Larry Lessig in mind. Larry famously talked about the 4 regulators. It takes 4 levers of change to really change the world. He talked about the architecture, by which I think he meant the technology. He talked about the law, the markets, and the norms, or the values. So when we called everyone together, we did so with that in mind. Thought leaders from technology, from law, from markets, and the avatars of values. Our artists who are always at the forefront of thinking about what things mean from a values perspective. So I just wanted to end by sharing with you 4 thoughts from 4 different thought leaders in each of these different realms. Jennifer Granick, the great legal scholar from Stanford and EFF, now with ACLU. Emily Jacoby, she's the founder of something called Digital Democracy, one of the great organizations using decentralized technologies in the Amazon. Joseph Poon of Lightning Networks. How many of you know Joseph? Joseph is truly, truly one of the great thinkers, out-of-the-box thinkers. And he brought a hack on the markets that I think will excite you. And the amazing, incomparable Cory Doctorow, author, blogger, ideologue, inspirer. Each of them had a message for the technologists of the world. Because together, we have to build Web 3.0. First, Jennifer Granick. Jennifer is now the Surveillance and Cybersecurity Council at the ACLU. But you know, she didn't really talk that much about the law. That was what was so surprising. Instead, she said, we need to look at the history of what went wrong to learn those lessons and to glean those lessons. So she really had a cautionary tale for the technologists. She talked about what this technology would face. She said, you know what? It wasn't greedy businesses or corrupt governments that made things go wrong. It was the users. It was the people. Jennifer Granick said the closed internet was what people wanted. People want good performance. They like free stuff. They wanted to stop hate speech. So how will each of you compete with that? Then she turned to the issue of surveillance. That's her real expertise. And she said, how are we going to protect this data? Indeed, with IoT, there's going to be more and more data to protect. And you're going to have to protect it against a formidable opponent, the governments around the world, because they like getting their hands on the data. They're used to it. And she said, if we build technology where surveillance is hard again, those governments are going to come after you. They're going to push back. So what are you going to do about that? Then she talked about free speech. We all love free speech, but we don't love it as much as we hate other things. Jennifer Granick said, people hate speech. People hate online harassment. People hate trolling. People hate terrorist recruitment. People hate child pornography. People hate the 3D printing of guns. So does a decentralized web have a plan for this? She challenges us. Ultimately, Jennifer Granick said to all of you, to all of us around the world, ultimately it is about our ethics and our accountability. The architecture. Joseph Poon, he is the co-author of something called the Lightning Network, which I'm sure you all know, but he is also one of the co-creators of something called Handshake. And I really want to encourage you to go to handshake.org and check it out, because it is a wild hack at the markets. Joseph said to me, you know, why should it be that 90% of the value goes to the VCs? Why shouldn't the value go to the coders who are building these technologies and these protocols? What if we could flip this on its head? He went on to say at our summit, blockchain replicates this game, this capitalist game, as a decentralized system to obviate the need for kings and assholes. If blockchain can get rid of kings and assholes, more power to it. He said that ultimately where he thinks we're headed is universal basic asset ownership. Universal basic asset ownership. An emergent game where the more you distribute to wider humanity and to open source developers, the greater your odds of success. And the great thing about Joseph and his group is that they're not just positing this theory, they're doing a big experiment. So here's what they've done. They've built a new tool based on the blockchain to replace certain parts of the DNS, through which billions of dollars flow, as we know. And that's interesting. You know, it's an interesting application of blockchain. But here's what's really interesting. First, they went to venture capitalists, and they raised $10.2 million from the largest VCs in the Valley. And they decided to give 30% of that money, $3 million, to 30 different open source coding projects, including, thank you, Joseph, the Internet Archive. The next 70%, $7 million, they are now giving away to open source coders. You can go to the site and apply to receive some of those coins yourself. And here's the wild thing. If after 3 years, this new technology is valued at more than $50 billion, Handshake.org vows to give away some of it to every person on the internet, perhaps 7 billion people. That's the experiment in markets that Joseph Poon and Handshake.org is leading right now. But it wasn't even so much about Handshake. He wanted to challenge all of you to do the same, to join him. He said that many coin projects and token developers should consider committing half their entire coin value and distributing it out to 7 billion people. So why do this? Because he believes I'll make more value the more I give away. Inverting the markets on their head to fuel this new web. Wild and crazy? Absolutely. Let's see what happens. Emily Jacoby works in some of the hardest places on earth, including the Amazon. She's using DAT technology to map some of the unmappable places of that region. But we asked Emily to come because she really comes from a place of values. Her talk was about tools of solidarity. And what did she mean by that? Solidarity, Emily told us, is recognizing that we are all interconnected and that the actions you take impact others and thus act accordingly. She said that's particularly relevant in technology. So, if you want to build tools of solidarity, what do you have to remember? A few of her lessons. Lead with your values. When you're working with partners, self-determination and autonomy is key. So we know it would be so much easier to just build the tools and hand them over, or to keep all the data yourself. But digital democracy does not do that. They make sure that all of the data resides with their partners and that the tools are built collaboratively. So the real key to their values is about collaboration. Emily told me, tools always reflect the values of their tool makers. And so we are going to build better tools when we sit down with the people who are going to use them and build them sitting at the same table. Finally, Cory Doctorow. Cory is one of a kind. He is amazing. He's a great writer, but he is also a great inspirer, and also, these days, a special advisor to the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Cory gave our closing keynote. He said, the utopian part of cyber-utopianism is democracy. The idea that anyone can and should hack their tools. But he said instead, the governments of the world are turning the internet into a constitutional democracy. For a little bit of control, a small group of people get to rule the roost. Corey said, I don't believe in aristocrats. So this next piece may surprise you. When he thought deeply about how to fix this, it wasn't, wow, we better do something, or bow, it might be better this time. Cory Doctorow says that he believes the answer to these aristocracies is getting policy right. I believe that getting tech policy right is the most urgent question today, he said. Getting tech policy right is prerequisite for making the world healthy and safe and prosperous and fair. His prescription and the prescription of EFF, which just launched their first paper, is more law, more regulation, but the right kind. Cory told us it is a moment of truth. Do we accept that the best way to prevent monopolists from monopolizing is to use anti-monopoly laws? It runs counter to the DNA of the Silicon Valley to be calling for more laws. But that's what Cory Doctorow says we're going to need if Web 3.0 is going to succeed. These are all brought to you as food for thought. These are people I have gotten to meet over the last 3 years and listen to and learn from. So if you are going to build the web we want, if you're going to build the web we deserve, today you are going to be listening to lots and lots of talks about technology, about decentralizing every part of the stack. But I want you to remember that there is one other piece of the stack that we need to build, the social layer. And that unless we consider the laws, the markets, the norms, and the technology, we cannot succeed. So let's do it together. Thank you.
One question.
They tell me I have time for one question. Any questions?
Everybody can have access to the means of power, and about democratizing all aspects of society, economy, law through new digital technologies. And right now in America, there's a very big problem with armed police and a very large weapons industry in the hands of government and corporations. And a guy democratizes the means for self-defense, that not only is it private military contractors that can produce weapons, but anybody now can develop their own, and we're not talking about nuclear weapons or heavy weapons systems. We're talking about the American rifleman, the basic means. For example, when the Soviet Union invented the Kalashnikov, there is a reason why so many liberation movements around the world have a Kalashnikov on their flags, is because it suddenly allowed people the means to be able to resist against larger powers.
Is this resolving in a question?
Yeah, of course. That you oppose, in this world of policy and democracy, that for you want to democratize the means of power, except you make an exception for self-defense. Is that, and you talk about diversity and inclusion, but is that not itself something that's very Western-centric? There's only in the West where the life that we live is propped up by a massive military-industrial complex that we can say, yeah, but we reject the means for people to be able to print their own 3D weapons. Does that not seem a little bit contradictory that you lump that in with child pornography and terrorism and all of these other things that, in fact, states are using as an excuses to encroach on these freedoms in the internet. It's a very dangerous
just
trap.
to qualify, what I did say was that I was quoting Jennifer Granick, who said that people hate trolls and they hate child pornography, and some people hate the fact that we can print guns in 3D. I don't think that anyone was saying I don't think anyone was trying to make a comment about armed militias and taking control back. But I tell you what, we're going to be holding a DWeb camp in San Francisco, Bay Area, next summer, in which you could actually do, in unconference style, a whole section on this. So I would, I guess if you're banned from America, that will make it very hard. But the rest of this convening and live stream, I want to invite you to come and hang out with us at DWeb Camp and talk about these deep issues. So thank you. And I'll be outside.
Thank you very much, Wendy.
Thank you.